The sign that welcomes you to the great green state of Oregon is so humble and so unobtrusive that if you blink or turn around to the back seat to grab a snack, you'll miss it. I did that twice this summer. I missed the sign entirely. When I decided to spend the first third of my sabbatical in the Pacific Northwest, I also decided that I wanted to take a road trip up there. We did a dry run last summer, and as it turns out, we are a pretty good road trip family. We even got road trip t-shirts. Mine reads shotgun/co-pilot, stay awake, drink coffee, spot state troopers, DJ/entertainment, food order taker, handle passenger complaints, eat, and repeat. We drove each day until we'd run out of gas, out of energy, out of patience. Mom, how long would it take us if we literally never stopped? And we just drove all day and all night until we got there. That's what my son asked one day when we pulled into a hotel under twinkling stars. Oh, we'd never make it, love, I said. We'd have to break it up. We just have to for our sanity. Now, I was also the party responsible for the morning recitation of Tefillat Haderech, the traveler's prayer. We'd usually first roll out of the neighborhood, maybe even get on the freeway, and only then I'd pause the music to a collective chorus of, "Oh, Mom," from the middle row. "Again? Really?" they'd whine. "Again," I'd say. "Really?" Another day of leaving city limits. Another day of navigating traffic and obstacles and unpredictable drivers. Another day of handling passenger complaints and eating. Another route worthy of blessing. As we wound our way up the left-hand side of the country, I took comfort in daily Tefillat Haderech. It was my anchor in a sea of adventure. Literally no one day like the day before. Once, we went 25 miles off course to visit the world's largest olive. The most interesting thing we could find for a good 5-hour stretch through sun-dried pastures. The next day, we woke up just west of San Francisco, waves lapping at the base of our motel deck. And then we repacked the car. Again, and once more it was time for Tefillat Haderech, which was a preamble that day to our afternoon that we'd spend near Mount Shasta. Still, on day 5, I did think to myself, this is like one big long trip, right? Might my children be at least a little bit right here? Maybe it's worth one big blessing? It kind of felt like we were saying a little prayer before every nibble of an apple, a little prayer before every dribble of a basketball. It was kind of tedious. I never did resolve that feeling during my sabbatical, but I did return to it just last week when I was helping a student put tefillin on for the very first time. I put on my own tefillin so we could go through the choreography side by side. "It's only uncomfortable the first 1,000 times, I quipped, attributing that teaching to Rabbi Ari Lucas by name. As my student shifted uncomfortably, tucking a dangling strap into the palm of his hand, I also taught him, you say the blessings when you put tefillin on in order. First the arm, then the head, and if you have to take them off for some reason, like you need a bathroom break, most sources say that you should recite the blessings all over again. Or if you put them on a second time in the afternoon because you have a bar mitzvah student to teach," I said with a wink. Occasionally, I actually have 3 or 4 meetings on a given afternoon where I'm instructing students to lay tefillin, and there I am for the 5th time that day reciting Al Mitzvot Tefillin. Another blessing, another bite of the apple. In Tractate Sukkah of the Babylonian Talmud, the practice of saying blessings over tefillin is completely entangled with the practice of saying a blessing to celebrate use of the Sukkah. There was a dispute among some Tanaim, pre-Mishnaic rabbis. The chief editor of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, taught that every time someone puts on tefillin, they should recite a blessing over it. The other rabbis of the time, in contrast, taught that one should recite the blessing only once, the first time they put on tefillin in the morning. This argument grafted perfectly onto another dispute that they held, one about the Sukkah. Should one recite a blessing every time he performs the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah, or should she only do so at the start of the holiday? The Talmud then brings in a ruling from Abaye, a 4th century rabbinic voice, declaring that the halacha, the Jewish law, goes according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who would bless each time he put on tefillin. Now, Rava, Abaye's great rabbinic frenemy, ruled the opposite. The Talmud gets a bit spicy, citing Rav Mari, who said that he'd seen Rava disregard his own teaching. Rav Mari said that Rava would take his tefillin off to go to the bathroom, and when he put them back on, he'd say a blessing. The Talmud rules that we act in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and do as Rava did, not as he said, as it pertains to both tefillin and to the sukkah. We say a blessing as if each time is the first time we're doing the mitzvah that day. And so it goes that most Jews who do Sukkot wind up saying Leishev Basukkah, a whole lot over 7 days. When they make Kiddush the first night, when they bring a pack of Oreos out on Shabbat afternoon, when they begrudgingly drag a sleeping bag out there because their 2nd grader says that you, quote, literally promised we would camp out when I was old enough. Every year it's the same. I pull out a bencher to remind myself which blessing I say first. Is it Shehachianu and then Leishev, or depends on the day? By the 4th day, I'll say Leishev Basukkah so automatically that I'll be 6 bites into my sandwich, and then I ask myself, wait, did I even say the blessing? This is where my kids put their finger on something unsatisfactory about our Tefillat Haderech regimen. We had soured a ritual moment with familiarity, bleached it clean and brittle with whitewash of routine. We bled it dry of intention so that getting on the road resembled less a tender touch of a mezuzah and more like a habitual wiping of the feet on a doormat before you walk in the door. Automaticity is the antithesis of intentionality. The stronger a habit, even a great Jewish habit, the more likely it's a place where kavanah has expired. We were a few weeks deep into our stay in Seattle when I started writing the chapter of my book on ritual that focuses on the principles of ritual in design thinking and what happens when one principle loses integrity. The second principle of ritual is je ne sais quoi, that the ritual has a certain something magical that you can't quite put your finger on. With some distance from our community, I turned a critical eye to a ritual that had emerged during wartime in Israel and seemed to have lost its luster. I wrote the following. Maybe like our synagogue did, you responded to the most recent war in Israel by adding Hatikva to your services. It's not something you'd sung as a congregation, at least not during a Shabbat morning gathering. The first time you ended services with Hatikva, I bet it was amazing. There was truly a je ne sais quoi factor to the whole thing. You couldn't put your finger on it, but it's exactly what people needed at the moment. The first few weeks, you left services with an extra spark. The anthem was an emotional send-off, And then something shifted. The anthem just wasn't feeling special anymore. Over time, the je ne sais quoi factor diminished. Distance from tragedy does that. It's probably a healthy part of the human response to trauma. By week 5 or 6, I bet you found yourself folding your talit while singing Hatikva. No longer in the moment, you're thinking about what's next. What looked like a new ritual has faded into the liturgical backdrop, something that you can't quite call ritualized, because what was once a tether to urgent news has become a charming reference to the homeland. The decent thing to do, perhaps, but not magical. Without je ne sais quoi, I wrote, rituals turn perfunctory. Bless, do the thing, repeat. Our tradition has a bias toward the requisite repetition of blessings when re-entering a mitzvah or a mitzvah-rich space. We're caught in a downward spiraling conundrum. The more our literacy grows, and we are in a literate community, the better our muscle memory, and the less likely we are to execute our blessings and rituals with full attention. By the end of the summer, I had, of course, memorized Tefillat Haderech. But was my Tefillat Haderech getting more powerful, or was it growing less impactful? It rained once our entire trip to Washington, which is a lot less than the caricatures of that state would have had me believe, even in the summer. We happened to be away from the kids on a weekend getaway to Whidbey Island, where we were camping in a treehouse, a mile or so above the sound. From our perch up in the trees, we saw distant lightning, far before we could hear the thunder or feel it rumble beneath our feet. And then, from deep in the recesses of my yeshiva-steeped brain, a blessing poured out of my mouth, shekocho uvrato malei olam, that divine might and power fill the world. There I was in my pajamas, binging a television show, snacking on Seattle chocolate, and I fully paused, automatically, to wonder at the glory and majesty of a storm. In her book, The Path of Blessing, Rabbi Marcia Prager calls on the wisdom of Jewish renewal that making blessings is a means to domesticating the peak experience, harnessing the intense highs that we can only reach on occasion, sometimes on purpose and often by happenstance, and pouring them back into mundane moments. In the rabbinic imagination, we're supposed to be making at least 100 blessings every day, so that even a very low batting average of meaningful moments, that would be rather incredible. We swing again and again and again. We bless again and again and again, knowing that each time we do so, there's a chance that maybe this time, maybe this second day of Sukkot, will fill with a second sense, an opportunity for holy wow. Singing Hatikva each service, because maybe, just maybe this time, there's a chance for one moment of renewed hope. I had a front row seat to my children this summer in a way that I had never experienced and probably won't again for quite some time. We don't have license as humans to witness growth. Our kids will sometimes wake up and put on a pair of pants that are suddenly too short, and we wonder, when on earth did they grow 2 inches? Sabbatical allowed me to train a slow motion camera on my 2 little ones to see them mature, to watch their patience flower, to gaze on their unfolding interests and talents and personalities. I've never believed more than I do now in the wake of my great sabbatical pause that we are not the same person 1 hour to the next, 1 day to the next. That is a terrific reason to return to the same blessing again within days or hours of reciting it, walking through the sukkah, a second or third or fourth time, even in the same day, because we are not the same person walking through the door of the sukkah as we were an hour ago or yesterday. Maybe this time we'll be moved. Maybe this time we'll be inspired. Or maybe next time. Sukkot is a long haul tacked onto a long haul season. It is a composite of mitzvot quilted beneath the thatched roof of a shelter that is certain to collapse, a last gasp in a season. So we have to break it up for our sanity, or we'd never make it. The dwelling in a sukkah never comes in one breath, but instead it starts and stops, stops and starts, each a new opportunity to offer a blessing that rings with authenticity. Each sukkah moment features a new version of us born in that moment. We might even leave the sukkah on purpose, ending a moment for the sake of initiating a new one, just so we have an excuse to come back, to bless, to eat, to dwell, and to repeat. Chag Sameach.